guys, it's Emily with Drift Lead. Welcome back to another video. In this one, we are going to be talking about A/B testing or split testing, specifically in Google Ads. So if you work in marketing or you are involved in modern marketing in any capacity, you probably know that today it is a very data-driven field. Way back, 20 years ago, beyond in the Mad Men era, it was maybe enough to just have a gut feeling or a hunch that an idea was really good and that it was probably gonna work. But today, that just simply doesn't cut it. You really have to use data to validate your ideas and thus inform the direction of your campaigns. That is really where A/B testing comes into play. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, or you simply have heard it, A/B testing being thrown around, but you maybe are not 100% sure what it is more or less a way of testing different variables in your campaign. In this case, I'm specifically going to be talking about your digital ad campaigns. More or less, it is a way of testing a new setting, a new headline in your ad, a new ad creative, a new landing page URL, day parting, etc. I mean, you can really test anything that you want to against a control campaign and see how it performs before you implement it at a larger scale. The advantages of using A/B testing compared to, let's say, a time series test, which is not really best practice, but some people do it. If you are simply making a change and you're going and comparing the new results to the results prior, you really don't know what the impact was because there are a million different factors that go into how your campaign performs, from competitive pressure to economic circumstances to just macro trends. When you're making a change and then comparing how it's doing now versus how it was doing prior, you really aren't getting the full story because you have some of these other influences that are impacting the test. A/B testing is really a great way to solve for that because it's going to let you split the traffic 50-50 during the same duration of time, and so you don't have to worry about some of those external factors influencing one set of the experiment and not the other. A/B testing is the most scientific and best way of actually determining whether something is going to perform well and work in your campaign. Okay, I am actually going to walk you through the process of setting up an experiment in your campaign because it has, even if you have done it in the past, within the past couple of years, Google has made some changes just to the process that you have to go through in order to set up these experiments. So I will walk you through that and show you an actual example. But before we do that, let's talk through some best practices when it comes to running an A/B test. So for starters, you want to make sure you have a clear objective in mind. Do you want to improve your click-through rates? Do you want to improve your conversion rates? Do you want to reduce your CPAs? Whatever it may be, it's really important that you know that beforehand so you know what success looks like. Because if you're testing an ad variation, it may improve your click-through rate, but maybe your conversion rate decreased. Was it a success or was it not? That's why it's important to determine that in advance. When you're doing this retroactively, it's harder to really determine how it performed. You want to make sure you test only one element at a time, generally speaking. Google Ads actually, when you're running experiments in there, as you'll see when I show you, it makes it very easy to facilitate this in sort of an isolated manner. You don't want to go in and just run a completely different ad against another ad because the new ad may perform better, but you don't really know what the cause was, especially when you're dealing with a responsive search ad where you have 12 different headlines, 4 different descriptions, and they're all different. Which one was the driver of the success? You also want to make sure you get to a point of statistical significance. So I believe Google will tell you whether or not it's statistically significant based on a preset confidence interval. But if not, you can, and if you're running ads through another platform, you can easily determine that by just typing into Google statistical significance calculator, and you can put in the data and it will tell you whether or not it is statistically significant. You want to make sure it's enough data for us to be actually confident that it was the winner. In order to get to that point of statistical significance, you do need to make sure you're giving the test enough time. In Google and actually most advertising platforms, if you are setting up a test, you will have the option to determine the end date. I usually don't suggest doing this just because you don't really know necessarily when it's going to reach a point of statistical significance. Although if you have a bigger budget, it'll take less time for it to learn versus a smaller budget, and you can obviously use that information to make an informed guess on when it's gonna reach, a point of significance, but you don't want it to end prematurely. Split testing kind of accounts for this because you're splitting the test during the same duration. So unlike the time series that we talked about, you're not gonna have, weekends, for instance, influencing one leg of the campaign and not the other. Definitely do keep in mind external things that could potentially influence the performance of the campaign. So for instance, holidays and things, some sort of anomalies that may, make one leg of the test perform a little bit better. Just keep your wits about you with things like that so that you can accurately judge the performance of the test. You also want to make sure you document everything. This is especially true if you're running multiple tests on different campaigns. And really in general, if you make any major changes, actually any change really that could influence your campaign performance, definitely make a note of what that was and when you made it, because you don't want to be scrambling trying to figure out why something is happening in the account and not have a paper trail of what it could be. And of course, the whole point of testing is learning what is going to work best for your specific campaign or your account. And so if something works well, you obviously want to implement it on a broader scale. And then you may want to take a headline that you tested that's performing really well, you're going to implement that to your ads, and then maybe you're going to test that against a new variation that you haven't tried yet, and just continuously be sort of upping the ante, so to speak, as far as coming up with the best performing headline. And of course, you want to make sure you're rerunning tests periodically, because Google, every advertising platform is always shipping new features and new setting options, and you want to make sure that just because you tested, let's say, Performance Max against a regular shopping campaign and it won, well now, there may be a new bidding algorithm that's even better, and you want to make sure that you aren't missing out on that opportunity just because you saw that Performance Max performed well. And similarly, consumer demand can change, so just because one ad variation performed really well 3 months ago doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to continue to perform well in the long term. Moral of the story is always be running tests, always be learning from them, always be iterating off of the champions, and that is kind of the algorithm to coming up with a winning campaign. Now I'm going to walk you through how to actually set up an experiment in your account. Over here on the left-hand side, towards the bottom, you're gonna see this experiments tab, and that is where it's all going to live. This used to be drafts and experiments. You still have drafts as an option within the interface, but it's going to be basically the same as if you were to make changes in Google Ads Editor. You can make all the changes, and if you just want to deploy it at once, you can do that using drafts. But it's no longer going to be affiliated with the experiments tab. You don't need drafts in order to create experiments anymore. So I'm gonna walk through each of these options with you. If you are running display campaigns, I believe you may see the option for video variations as well. I have seen that in some of my accounts, but not in others. This one is just search, so these options may vary a little bit depending on the types of campaigns that you're running. So for starters, we have ad variations. As the name may imply, you will have the option to test different variations of your ad against a control. So if you want to test different headlines, landing pages, if you want to see how pinning performs, if you are pinning a headline versus not pinning, you can test all of those ad related things in this ads variation tab, and they basically walk you through the setup very similarly to as if you were setting up a new campaign. Custom experiments is going to be most similar to what we were used to with drafts and experiments before. It will basically duplicate the campaign for you. You can make changes to it, and then it will split the traffic. Something unique about this that we didn't have with the old drafts and experiments is that you can actually run kind of a multi-arm bandit test where you can have different arms of the experiments testing different variables in isolation. So that's pretty cool and unique versus what we had before. And then you have your Performance Max options, because Google is so keen to get everybody off of manual shopping campaigns. They really want to show you how great Performance Max is, and they give you the option to very easily set up a test to see how Performance Max compares to your traditional shopping campaigns. And there's actually two options here. You can either test for an uplift from the Performance Max, so you can see if you wanted to say with confidence that Performance Max drove X, Y, Z more metric than the shopping, it will do that here. Or if you just want to see how, which one performs better, you can do that versus your shopping campaign. I don't have any shopping campaigns in this account. This was a lead gen account, so I'm not going to walk through it with you because I don't have any campaigns to show. But I will show you the custom experiments is probably the most straightforward, especially if you are familiar with the drafts and experiments prior. So what I will show you today is the ad variation example, and really setting up these experiments is going to be very similar among all different experiment presets here. So obviously to create the new test, you're going to go up here to the blue plus button. You can select a campaign. I already have my campaign segmented by mobile desktop, which I do prefer personally, especially when it comes to testing, because you can, again, sort of isolate that variable of what they're using. I'm gonna go with, and this was a psychiatric clinic, just in case you're wondering. I'm going to go with my mobile depression campaign, and this is optional, but if you have multiple ads within the campaigns and you only want to run the test with some, you can filter the ads to certain headlines, descriptions, paths, URLs. So let's say in this case, I only want to run this test for ads that contain the text depression treatment. And I'm gonna change depression treatment to depression relief. Oh, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. Depression relief, depression treatment. And this is gonna go find and replace all the instances of depression treatment and change it to depression relief. But you can also, if you wanna test different URLs, you can do that here. That will essentially be like a landing page split test, more or less. And then if you wanna update the text without doing a find and replace, you can do that here. Continue, I'm gonna call this depression relief headline. We're gonna start it today. The end date, I usually don't like to set an end date because again, you wanna make sure that the test is at a point of statistical significance before it ends. So setting a date may cause it to end prematurely. If you are gonna set a date, just make sure you kind of take into account how much data the campaign is gonna collect based on budget. Also keep in mind that it's being split in half. So you kind of, between the two different legs of the test. So again, I just like to not do an end date, and I keep an eye on it. And once it reaches statistical significance, I will end it. But if you want to set an end date, then just of course, make sure you're taking into account the data density. So then you're gonna go ahead and create variation. When I went through this before and was not recording, I went ahead and accidentally set this up as well. So it says it's active. It's obviously not because the account is canceled, it's not running, but you should see this, and that means that the test is running. And let's say it's completed and it won, and you want to implement the change to the actual campaign without the split test, you would just go ahead and click the apply button and it would apply whatever you were testing to the campaign. So that's pretty much it. So the first thing you don't want to do is neglect your device types. Usually these two devices are going to perform vastly different from each other because they're getting completely different experiences on the website or landing page. The ads that they're seeing are going to be different. Google has different extensions and things that show up based on whether a user's using a desktop or mobile device. So usually you want to make sure you're taking this into account when you run your tests. The best way to do this is just have your campaigns always segmented by mobile and desktop, something I personally do, so then when I run a test, it's already kind of pre-configured for me and I don't have to worry about it. You also don't want to just set it and forget it. I think this reigns true for literally anything you do in your advertising accounts, but I think it's more common now with like automated bidding and things that people just assume Google is going to take care of it for you. In the case of tests, especially if you're not setting an end date, which by the way, you can change the end date as the test goes on. So if you do set an end date and the test is running and it's not looking like it's gonna reach a point of statistical significance, you can extend it. But in the case that you don't set an end date, you need to be monitoring it so that when it does reach that point of statistical significance, you can end it and implement the changes, because otherwise you're going to be missing out on potentially a lift to the campaigns because you're potentially one thing is performing really well and it's not implemented at a broader scale. If you are feeling overwhelmed by all of this and you feel like, oh my gosh, I do not have any time to do all this testing, don't worry, we can help. That is what we specialize in, is paid media and running tests and doing all of that fun stuff. that not everyone wants to do. So if that sounds like you and you could use a little bit of help, then we are offering a free marketing plan that you can download by going to our website, driftly.com, or clicking on the link down below in the description. And thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope it was helpful. If so, please give it a thumbs up so we know to make more like it. And please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any marketing tips and tricks, and it helps us a lot. So we appreciate it, and we will see you guys in the next video.